fearful that I'm going to look to my right and see Joe and Daniel and just be gawking at everything around us. And to have the White House as the backdrop for a UFC live event, this really feels like one of one. I do believe, Niko, future United States presidents are going to think about executing maybe an NBA game on the White House lawn. And Dana White and President Trump were not going to be denied. And on TV, it's going to be an absolute spectacle, and I just can't wait to get to Washington, D.C.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be joined by the lead play-by-play caller of the UFC, the voice of the sport, the great Jon Anik. Jon, thanks ever so much for joining us once again on Fox Sports, mate.
Niko, my pleasure, man. Good to see you.
You as well. Now, Jon, I remember a couple of years ago watching you call that event at the Sphere, and I just remember you and Rogan and DC remarking throughout the evening just how staggering it was to be calling fights at such an incredible venue. What about UFC Freedom 250? Can you even put into words just how surreal it is to be calling fights on the lawn of the White House?
I almost want to turn the interview back on you and say, was it a little bit too much that night? Because as I've gotten ready for this live event and I've seen some of the renderings and I start to put in my mind what I'm walking into, thankfully there is the comp that is the Sphere, because I've said over the last 10 days or so that I'm fearful that I'm going to look to my right and see Joe and Daniel and just be gawking at everything around us. And to have the White House as the backdrop for a UFC live event, I never thought the Sphere would be touched. All we were hoping was that somehow we would find our way back into that venue. It seems like that was one of one, but Dana White just loves pulling off these one of one live events. And it is going to be absolutely spectacular. The bells, the whistles, the pageantry. It's going to be an amazing television live event. And certainly for people that are there, it's going to be unbelievable, celebrating the United States of America. But I can assure you, on TV, it's going to be an absolute spectacle. And I just got out of a meeting, and I just can't wait to get to Washington, D.C.
Well, I don't think the Sphere was too much. I thought it was absolutely incredible. And you look throughout history, Jon, and sport has always been really good at pushing the boundaries, right? I mean, you think all the way back to Rumble in the Jungle taking place outdoors in Zaire, right? And then I remember when I was a kid, like Roger Federer played a game of tennis against Andre Agassi atop the Burj Al Arab. You know, and like even more recently, right, you've got like the F1 turning the Las Vegas Strip into a street circuit, you know, the Paris Olympics moving the opening ceremony to the River Seine. Jon, where does this White House event, I guess, rank for you in I guess, the bizarre but spectacular sporting events that have taken place?
So if you have been to a Super Bowl, if you're an NFL fan in the United States of America, and especially if your team is in it, there's nothing like it. And I would often say that the UFC pay-per-views are Super Bowls, right? The NFL has one a year. We got 13 of them. And they really do feel, our numbered events and our pay-per-view events, for me, feel absolutely off the charts in terms of their magnitude. This really feels like one of one. I do believe, Niko, future United States presidents are going to think about executing maybe an NBA game on the White House lawn and see if they can get all the conditions to be right. And I think they're going to realize what a massive undertaking it is. But Dana White and President Trump were not going to be denied. And I do think that the UFC fans and mixed martial arts fans around the world stand to be the beneficiary of that. There's going to be a lot of connective tissue, not unlike Mexico for the Sphere, with the United States here, and tying together U.S. history into this and celebrating the country. But at the end of the night, it's going to be the two biggest stars in the promotion, Alex Pereira and Ilia Topuria, showcased back to back, which really wouldn't happen, you know, unless you had a backdrop like the White House. So I think for me, it'll be the highest profile live event that I ever call, until International Fight Week, when Conor McGregor makes it.
Well, we'll speak about Conor in just a moment, Jon. But, I mean, as a broadcaster, this is all so fascinating. I mean, I was speaking with you mentioned you just had a meeting. I spoke with Craig Borsari on this show only a couple of weeks ago, and he was detailing and going through all the logistical issues that he and the team have encountered in the lead up to this event. Everything from weather contingencies to getting hundreds and hundreds of trucks on and off the property every day. It was just staggering to think about all the things that might not cross your mind, like not being able to touch any of the trees or landscaping on the property. What about for you, Jon? How is, if you could peel back the curtain a little bit for us, how is preparing for UFC Freedom 250 compared to getting ready for just any other fight night?
Well, huge acknowledgement to Craig Borsari and everybody on down. What a huge logistical undertaking. And I'm glad you mentioned the trucks, right? Because even just something like that you don't think about, or trying to build this infrastructure in Pennsylvania before it actually makes its way to DC, right? Actually taking the time and the resources and the money to do a practice build, make a few adjustments, and then bring the thing to Washington, DC. Absolutely incredible. So I've sort of joked when people have asked me, and again, I think my nerves, and they're good nerves, but they are heightened now as we're getting closer. But Niko, we've talked a lot in the past, right? I'm prepping 14 athletes instead of 28. I'm doing a 4-hour live event instead of 8. So bring the gnats, bring the bugs, bring the humidity, bring all the elements. I'm ready for all of it, right? We're ready to execute. I think for me, it's exciting to call, in many respects, a more normalized sporting event, really wrap my head around the 14 athletes. I think we'll probably have fighter meetings with every athlete on the card, which never can be our reality when there are 28. And I think largely in terms of the show formatics, there will be maybe some shades of the Sphere show in terms of some features and things like that. But we have 2 championship belts on the line. And ultimately, I think that it's going to be about, Topuria versus Gaethje and Pereira versus Gane and everything that comes before it.
Jon, you're so right. In addition to that, though, I kind of feel like there's certainly a lot more casual intrigue around this event as well. And it's got to be so fun. Jon, can I ask you, what excites you most about preparing for this event? And I guess, what do the fans who are watching on Main Event come, the fight day, have to look forward to the most?
So I think for a lot of people who haven't seen this sport, I think they'll understand why for people like you and me, we have gravitated to it to such an extent. It really is unpredictable theater, unlike most anything in professional live sports. And oftentimes when I'm watching TV or flipping through the channels with my kids and we come across a sporting event, my son, who's 7, will always say, "Is that live?" And yeah, it is. And it's going to be ubiquitous, and it's going to be at the home of the President of the United States of America. Now, I don't lean too much into, how are you going to call these fights, or what is your audience going to be like, and how are you going to cater to them? Or I try not to overthink it, right? And I do think that as I talk more as a talking head leading up to these live events, right, you start to sort of feel the magnitude of it. But I'm telling you, my man, my focus is, tail to tape. I got a count of 20 seconds because maybe there's a band that counts down to buffer, right? But for me, a lot of it really is about the fighting. And, perhaps I might be a little bit more inquisitive to Daniel Cormier in terms of some explanations, because we're going to be casting a wider net. But it's really just unabashed excitement and enthusiasm to bring what we believe is as good, sort of humbly, a live event production as there is in pro sports to a lot of different people. And we just can't wait to showcase this amazing sport and this amazing promotion to the world.
You mentioned President Trump only a moment ago, and Craig Borsari told us that he had a couple of things to say to the team, I guess, in preparations for this event. Has he spoken to you or any of the talent pool potentially about directions and how to put this show on at all?
No, I think that he probably is not going to micromanage this thing. I mean, my interactions with him have been outstanding. He, but at the end of the day, I feel like he's just a mixed martial arts fan. He comes into the booth and he says, I watch you guys every Saturday night. You're great at what you do. I really do believe that he is a fight fan. And if you do notice, when he comes to our live events, he's completely locked in on the action. And, his sons will check in on their soon-to-be 80-year-old father and make sure that he's okay. But for the most part, he's locked in on the action and the athletes and giving them their proper respect. So, I'm excited to have all the different contemporaries in the building, Medal of Honor winners and some decorated soldiers, past and present, uniformed military personnel, and the commander-in-chief as well. But we're excited. It's really a celebration of country, I think, more than this administration per se.
Well, speaking of locking in on the athletes, let's get into it, Jon. Ilia Topuria, we haven't seen the great man in action in about a year's time. As incredible as he is, how do you feel like the layoff is going to affect the champion?
Well, it's mixed martial arts, right? And part of the reason we talk about it as the greatest unpredictable theater in live sport is because anything can and does oftentimes happen. And much is going to be made of these athletes competing outside, wind, heat, things like that. And, I've said I'm not sure George St. Pierre in the middle of his prime defending his title would have wanted to make a title defense outside. Maybe he would have said, hey, I understand this White House event is big, but maybe could you book me in Philadelphia at UFC 330 or whatever it is? You know what I mean? So, I do think there are a lot of elements to this live event that are going to make it special and potentially be things that a champion as amazing as Ilia Topuria has to deal with. When they set a betting line, they're trying to command two-way action. And right now, Justin Gaethje, the price is all over the place, depending on where you shop, right? I believe in Gaethje. I believe that he is more of a threat than any of those wide betting lines suggest. But when I do my podcast with three-time UFC title challenger Kenny Florian, he says that Ilia Topuria is the greatest MMA athlete he's ever seen. And even if maybe he's a little bit unproven in terms of the title defenses or the longevity, when I hear people like Kenny talk in those terms, it certainly widens my eyes. But you got to be perfect every night. Floyd Mayweather was 50-0, right? Never really flat on fight night. Slow start against Shane Mosley, came back from it, right? Mixed martial arts makes it hard to come back from an early right hand or an early leg kick potentially or body kick. So I'm excited to see how Gaethje can employ his arsenal. But again, when you talk to the smarter MMA minds than me, they talk superlatively in a way about Ilia Topuria that is on that John Jones, George St. Pierre level. So we'll see if he can hold serve as a 7-1 favorite or whatever he is.
And just on, I guess, recovering from early shots, I think alongside a lot of MMA fans might have counted out Justin Gaethje before he fought Paddy Pimblett most recently. But to be able to see him knock the Scouser down twice in that first round and dominate him for much of that fight, I think was a big shock. And I guess it still proves that, one, in MMA anything can happen, and two, that Justin Gaethje, despite the age, still has what it takes to hold UFC gold.
Yeah, odds makers look at a lot of different things. They look at age. It's a real measuring stick. And Justin Gaethje is going to be on the wrong end of this age equation. There are talking heads who have wondered aloud about Gaethje's chin and is he a little bit punchy? I don't necessarily believe that to be true. How's his current form? Yeah, Paddy Pimblett had some moments, and Ilia Topuria is a much keener, sharper striker than Paddy, but look at Gaethje's current form. He beat Rafael Fiziev, who's really hard to beat, twice, beat him recently, beat Paddy Pimblett as an underdog, right? Is a tremendous athlete outside of MMA. Justin's a great athlete. It's not just the backflips, right? He just had a hole-in-one on the golf course, right? Can throw the heck out of a football. He really has a lot of tools. I just think he's going to have to be pretty perfect. And I think in some of those early exchanges, he's really going to have to try to land something of consequence and try to change the complexion of the fight. Because I think while some people suggest a longer fight favors him, I'm not necessarily sure that's the case.
Well, speaking of multifaceted athletes, the co-main event features two of those as well. But speaking of fighting, I kind of feel like, nothing gets bigger than a heavyweight title fight. But it's my opinion that I kind of feel like it's win-win regardless of what takes place in this co-main event for the company, because Alex Pereira taking on, Tom Aspinall for an undisputed title fight later on in the year is massive. But there's certainly a lot of history between Tom and Ciryl Gane as well. So not only are we in for an exciting fight, but exciting ramifications as well.
Tremendous fight. It's essentially a pick'em when it comes to the odds. And yes, sometimes I lean into the odds. It is but one lens through which to look at these matchups, right? But as they try to get people to bet on both sides of that, these two fighters have been neck and neck. And I do think that a lot of the pundits out there and my broadcast partners are split on that fight. I think it's going to be fascinating to see Alex Pereira as an MMA heavyweight. And even though he doesn't have a lot of experience in that division, in this particular combat realm, he seems to wear the part well. So I think a lot of us felt like this was an eventuality that we would eventually see Alex Pereira as a heavyweight. But I can understand why people are bullish on Ciryl Gane's chances as well. He's an outstanding striker, great footwork, great mind for fighting, really experienced. Feels like every other fight for him has been a title fight. So, I think whether these guys were fighting at 225 or heavyweight, it's the fight that jumps off the card, Niko, for a lot of people, and rightfully so. And, I haven't been able to find a lot of people who are really convicted on one side or the other. fascinated to see how it plays out. And I think you're right, promotional upside regardless of who wins.
The UFC continues to roll on, and John, you mentioned him a little earlier, but it's amazing to think that after this White House extravaganza, we're going to see the return of the notorious one. John, can I ask you, what excites you most, I guess, about calling a once-in-a-lifetime athlete like Conor McGregor, particularly when he's coming up against somebody like Max Holloway? Like, what's that like for you?
It's crazy to think back to the global pandemic. He fought Donald Cerrone in January of 2020 before all hell broke loose. And then he competed twice in 2021. And Conor McGregor was trying to get back into an active competition cycle. And you can call me ambitious or optimistic or idealistic, but I do believe that Conor McGregor is of a mentality that this is sort of at least a 2-fight series to come back here. And you just hope, regardless of what the last several years have held for him recreationally, professionally, in the gym, that he is all in. And I said to Ray Longo on our show, right, would it make you feel better if Conor was showing you his gym workouts and showing you his sparring and showing you how shredded he was? And Ray said, yeah, it would, right? So sometimes if a fighter shows you on social media how yoked they are and everything that they've been doing, maybe you can feel better about their preparation. One thing that we know is that maintaining mixed martial arts skills takes a lot of work. Wrestling maintenance, jiu-jitsu maintenance, striking maintenance, all of it. So I don't know exactly what Conor McGregor has been doing, but he's an outstanding athlete. He's a really precise striker. He still figures to be very powerful. So I expect him to perform well and to perform better than the betting line. And if he can be healthy, God willing, to maybe compete again late 2026. He's certainly not back as a prize fighter for money. You know, he wants more scalps, right? I mean, he feels like his legacy as far as the UFC is probably a little bit incomplete, right? Never defended the lightweight championship. He's got one win at 155 pounds in the UFC. So hopefully he's back and willing to bite off a couple fights here. I'm cautiously optimistic.
John, it's seemingly a daily conversation within these four walls here at Fox Sports, just how exciting the UFC is going to be to end the year as we head into the second half of 2026. But somebody who's obviously on the radar of many UFC fans is the great Islam Makhachev, who, of course, beat our very own Jack Della Maddalena most recently. But we expect to see him return very, very shortly. How excited are you to see him back in the octagon? And how do you feel like he matches up against somebody like Ian Machado, Garry, if indeed that is the matchup?
Yeah, Islam Makhachev is the pound-for-pound king, but we're all getting a little bit impatient, right, Islam? You know, and I don't know if it's his doing or if they've sort of waffled between Ian Machado, Garry, and Michael Morales potentially. Carlos Prates obviously is making a charge. But I think sometimes as fans we get a little bit impatient. And there might have been an injury for Islam Makhachev in there, but sometimes we get impatient when there starts to be a buildup of welterweight contenders. And it's like, man, I mean, we got like 4 guys who are worthy of fighting for the belt. We got to put the belt on the line and we got to expedite the process. I think Ian Machado, Garry knows what he's up against. I feel like when it comes to Ian, student of the game doesn't even begin to describe it. Trot out any cliche, right? No stone unturned. Anything that he can possibly do to prepare himself for that grappling and that wrestling and that suffocation, he will do. Just might not be enough. I think when it comes to the matchup, just might not be enough. But it also comes back to what makes this sport great. And Islam's been pretty perfect, but Adriano Martins got him back in the day, right? Not as perfect as Khabib Nurmagomedov. I'm just saying, right? We are conditioned in this sport to expect the unexpected. Sean Strickland going to Sydney, beating Israel Adesanya, just beat Khamzat Chimaev, right? Few things surprised me in this sport anymore. So you never know.
Just lastly from me, John, speaking of impatience, somebody who most Australians are very, very keen to see in the octagon once again is our very own national hero, Alexander Volkanovski. Is there any idea of when and where we might be able to see him fight next? And how do you feel like he matches up against Movsar Evloev, because he seems to be the next in line for that featherweight strap?
Man, Volk wants to take Movsar Evloev's O so badly. And I think it's got to be encouraging for Team Volk and fans of his to see how excited he is about this matchup. You know, even when he called for it before and they gave him the rematch against Diego Lopez, which sort of felt like a wasted title defense, He was the one calling for Movsar Evloev. I think he feels like he can expose him over 25 minutes, and we'll see. It's as good a fight as we can put together, though, in the featherweight division. It's been a long time coming. A lot of people don't realize that Movsar was booked to fight Ilia Topuria in January of 2022, I think, at UFC 270, and what might have been, right, if those two had competed in the featherweight division. But, yeah, I mean, I think that if anybody can handle Evloev's suffocating pace and have the mental fortitude to fight through a bad round or takedown or two, it's Alexander the Great Volkanovski, and just continues to amaze. And, I did find some of the commentary leading into Volk's last fight against Diego Lopez a little bit laughable in terms of the retirement talk or whatever else, because the dude's still sharp as a tack and might even be getting better just in terms of knowing his body and when to push and when to pull back. So, in terms of the timeline, Niko, I mean, I think your sources on the ground are probably better than mine, but hopefully we get it sooner rather than later. He's always of an appetite to compete. No pun intended, cooking with Volk. He always wants to fight, but sometimes you are the victim of your success, and when you become a star on his level, you're strategically held for the right date, the right location, and here we are.
I love our all-encompassing conversations, Jon. It's always such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on Fox Sports. Good luck with the call at UFC Freedom 250, and have fun at the White House, mate.
Thank you, buddy. Always a pleasure.